Hello, today I come to you with a review of Canadian History for Dummies. I'll kind of briefly describe what the book is about and sort of just talk about why I found the book useful for my purposes. I think depending on what kind of reader you are, how you react to this book may vary. Canadian History for Dummies is sort of the history of For Dummies books, where the obviously the publisher gets various writers to do books on things that people want primers on. This one being on Canadian history. The writer they went to for this was Will Ferguson, who is a Canadian travel writer and novelist. He actually won the Giller Prize, which is the top Canadian prize for literature, for his book For 419, which I had no idea that he had actually won the Giller Prize, but that's exactly how well kept up I am on stuff like this. He won the 2012 Giller Prize for his novel. He's a humorist writer. He's won the Stephen Leacock Award, another Canadian award, for the Stephen Leacock Award for humor 3 times, which, your mileage can vary on how funny you find someone. But so this was a novelist, a humor writer, a travel writer who was taking on Canadian history to kind of present it in a fairly conversational, sometimes lightly sarcastic way, injecting little bits of attitude into how he covered the topic. So this starts from sort of the kind of the Indigenous peoples of Canada, kind of first contact, going through the rise of New France, the fall of New France, the kind of failed Canadian Republic of, there's the Americans doing all their stuff and trying to suck the other colonies up above that are going to become Canada into it. Then there's the Confederation, where Canada becomes Canada. Kind of the end of like English Canada, as strictly as an English thing, or a French thing for that matter. There's part 7's like the Dark Days, which is the Depression, Depression, World War II, and the Cold War. Part 8 is sort of a noisy evolution, which is the Quiet Revolution, but also the FLQ, going to the 1980s referendum, and then the Meech Lake Accord after that. All this stuff of between how to contain or accommodate or somehow keep the French Canada within Canada when a lot of them want to leave, and sort of this book ends up with a one-party rule, which is sort of the is the Chrétien Paul Martin years, the last time that we had a liberal government in here, and also sort of the rise of we get those hints of the rise of the conservative, what will become the newly formed Conservative Party under Stephen Harper. So yeah, that's the scope of the book. So that's from very beginnings up until sort of the 2000s, I'd say. This was first published in 2012. I believe this is oh, I didn't even look at it. This is the updated version, which I believe is, if I can flip forward fast enough, good Lord. It's a large book. I guess it's a large book. It's 606 pages on my Kindle. I believe this is the 2019. Okay, copyright 2005, but I believe that this is maybe. Okay. Well, I guess I'll be editing this video. There. Yeah, so going up into the early aughts, copyright 2005 on this book. So as he says within this book, it's organized around 3 themes, which are keeping the U.S. out, keeping the French in and trying to get the native people to somehow disappear, which is definitely themes in Canadian history. The book, because it's kind of the dummies format, it kind of clicks between those kind of themes. Also has a third, fourth thing, which is sort of disagreements, which is, this is history, and various historians disagree on their interpretations of things. Will Ferguson will chime in with his own disagreements or opinions on stuff, though especially in the early chapters, that is not as much of a that's not as much of a thing. So why did I pick up this book? The reason I picked up this book was because I was reading a much more specific book called Clearing the Plains by James Daschuk, which is Disease, Politics of Starvation, and the Loss of Aboriginal Life on the Canadian plains, where Daschuk is really focusing in on the native experience of pre-contact, and then its interaction with the HBC, but then most specifically with its ill treatment, the politics of starvation by the newly formed Confederation government. And indeed, it's even more probably centered around kind of the tenure of John A. Macdonald, the book ending in 1891 with him going out of politics. And well, this is an excellent book, and I've done a review of it, and I highly recommend it. It's also laser focused and it really assumed that I had a much deeper knowledge of Canadian history than I actually did, and didn't really include that context in it, which is why Canadian History for Dummies was the book I needed a remedial thing. I needed something for a dummy like me to be able to kind of know, what the hell Daschuk was talking about in all this stuff. So I went to this book, which is it's a very general history on Canada. Now, the thing is with a lot of general histories is they're written for school kids. They're written for, either high school or university level, but, for lectures where you're going to have a professor who's going to lecture and kind of inject the life into it. And they have a tendency to be kind of pretty much dry recitations of facts, and that is pretty brutal to go through if you are just somebody who is a individual reader reading at home. So this was a really useful book for me because it got me through the very general overview of Canadian history, but did it in a conversational way with little asides, a little kind of sarcastic stuff in there, made it very readable. It was actually, as just a reading experience, it was good to flip through. It also reading this at the same time I'm reading Clearing the Plains, which is a much more scholarly book, which is a much more detailed book. It highlighted the differences that Ferguson, just because of his storytelling, has to really jump over tons and tons of the nuance and the little details. And just like this book is still very much told from a white Canadian settler kind of point of view. That's kind of unavoidable. It's the political history of Canada for the most part. We don't even get, like, I'm from British Columbia. Don't get a ton about British Columbia in here. This is a lot about Ottawa, the federal politics of, John A. Macdonald and all that, and Federation. And, like, once BC gets in, it's like, okay, well, it's in, and we're not going to dwell too much on that particular part. This is an overarching view of the thing. So it can lead stuff, even though that does actually give Canadian History for Dummies does actually make a point of stopping and saying, and this was the native perspective on things. It still doesn't really hold. It's only going to give you the slightest little flavoring of, like, maybe how it was to be a native person within outside of Canada and then getting brought into Canada. It really papers over a lot of that stuff unavoidably. And it's not like it's distorting history. It's just telling it from a particular perspective. And Ferguson himself is somebody who is an Albertan, so is well aware of how, Western Canadians, we feel fairly ignored by the East, those Easterners, those that, well, actually it's not even Easterners, it's the Toronto centric or the or that kind of that area, and then obviously all as well, very much an English Canadian, that divide of English, or um, there's Quebec, and then there's the rest of the country kind of perspective. So you're not getting a Quebecois perspective in this book either. But that said, it was a good start. That's all I wanted. Is I wanted a general overview. I wanted the grand vista, the kind of taking it all with a grain of salt, as that it's an introduction to Canadian history. This isn't the end all and be all. It's not like, oh, I've read this, now I know everything about Canadian history. It's like, no, I've gotten a general introduction. I sort of know where the general pieces are, and that's sort of what I was going for. And it was readable. It was not super dry. I found it's interesting. I found, as I got later on in the book, I found the chapters a lot less useful. It's funny where you suddenly go, oh, suddenly it's not history anymore. Suddenly it's like, oh, I remember Brian Mulroney. And I remember, Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, and he's got definitely got opinions on Paul Martin, and exactly how good of a politician that Paul Martin was. He's got very much attitudes about that. So those are the sections where I really took it with a grain of salt. Then it became like, okay, well, now it's before it's like, okay, we're doing the history, and it's a little bit more, okay, this is history and stuff like this. But when you get into it, and it's like suddenly like, oh, well, I have opinions about that. Suddenly it becomes much more contentious, which I can see if you're an actual historian reading about something like later back in Canadian history, you probably will have, you might have issues with Daschuk, but you have to, as a general ignoramus who needs a dummies book, I thought this was a good introduction. Though even for me, stuff like we stop in this book at near the end, and it's the 2002 Olympics, and Canada's has won double gold, and it's just like, who cares? Who cares? This is one of these things of like, you wait another 10 years, and this is obviously something that would just get dropped out of the book. At least I would think. But then again, maybe I'm not a hockey Canadian, so what the hell would I know? So yeah, that's my reactions to Canadian History for Dummies by Will Ferguson, who has made a very readable, light, kind of just general overview of Canadian history. It is not the end all and be all. It is one of these things of, I was really glad to have that so that I could put some more of James Daschuk's book Clearing the Plains into context. So yeah, that's my thing of it. I'm a 55-year-old guy. I'm not a 55-year-old. Will Ferguson is 55 years old. I'm slightly younger than him. I'm like 51, but it's like, I'm not going to go to, I'm not going back to the class for this. So this was a great alternative for me. All right. More videos later.